Romania's interior minister has been appointed interim prime minister after Marcel Ciolacu resigned after a right-wing nationalist candidate won the first round of the country's presidential election. George Simeone's victory plunges Romania into further political turmoil months after a first attempt to hold the election was cancelled because of suspected Russian interference. Let's go live now to Bucharest, and I'm joined by political analyst Radu Magdin. Radu, good to have you once again on the program. Now, let's first go to this first round of the presidential election. And the hard-right Eurosceptic George Simion won that convincingly. What drew Romanian voters to him?
Thank you so much once again for the invitation. It's an honor to be back. So first of all, what we're seeing right now is in fact a rematch of the previously cancelled round one of presidential elections. The society didn't really change its options in just a few months' time. The only thing which is different is the personalities who have joined the second round, so the winners of the first round. But essentially, they're coming from the two basic pillars, the same basic pillars. On the one hand, you have a pillar of society which wants a radical change. Initially, they were called extremists, then they were called sovereignists. I would call them radicals, right? They're more conservatives, they're more to the right, and they're pretty radical. And then you have another pillar in society, which is also partially anti-system, but the milder version. They call themselves more reformist or more modernist. And this is now the mayor of Bucharest, Radu. So in only 6 months, society hasn't fundamentally changed its views. They clearly want a president who is outside of the current government coalition.
So he's going to be facing, the mayor of Bucharest, Dan, in the runoff later this month. Is it a given that Simeone would win this quite easily?
It's not a given. Normally, outliers, the ones who are starting from a lower position, try more, work more, and it's always, easier for them to fight in a stronger way to make sure that they win. It's true that there is a high probability that Mr. Simion wins, and I say this why because it's within reach for him compared with Dan, who has to recover up to 30% of the electorate. But it all depends on the participation at levels which are similar to current participation, which was around 53%, then Mr. Simion wins. If, like in previous elections, we managed to see in the second round more emotion, so the creation of a wave, whether for the positive or for the negative, at around 60% or more, then Dan has a chance to win these elections as well.
So now the consequence of this first round has been the resignation of the Prime Minister Marcel Ciolacu. Why did he quit and withdraw his party from that governing coalition that had a majority in the parliament?
Honestly, that's a sign of political weakness. Probably the prime minister wanted to retire, to make some kind of an exit from Romanian political life, but in a gesture that few of us understood, he couldn't wait till the second round, right? Because at the end of the day, Romania is suffering right now from the perception of increased political risk. Our economy has been trolling, having great numbers in the past 17 years since we joined the EU. It's true, like all other economies, we're now preparing for a global recession. But nonetheless, this extra element of political instability, namely the prime minister stepping down, was literally a gratuitous act. Because under our constitution, the president is not as strong, for example, as the French president, as Macron, and for sure not as strong as President Trump, right? So a governing coalition could have well stayed over there, irrespective of a president of a different political color.
Yes, and because I'm really scratching my head because Ciolacu did say that, quote, rather than let the future president replace me, I decided to resign. So, how do you sort of explain that to an audience when, his party possibly...
It's a sign of political weakness.
Yeah.
It's a sign of political weakness. And unfortunately, it's also his party who is going to pay a price. I say this why? Because his party, the Social Democrats, insisted last year for a series of hikes of pensions and salaries to protect the population in electoral context. But the thing is, that has increased our deficits, and now it's increasing also our risk premium as we borrow from international markets.
Yes, and the last time I spoke with you, Radu, was about the case of Călin Georgescu, who was another far-right populist. He was ruled ineligible by the courts because of alleged Russian interference in the first round. And now I'm reading that he might now have the chance to become prime minister with Simeone if he becomes the president. Is that possible?
Mr. Simion tries to keep him close because Mr. Georgescu has his own electorate. So the score that Simion obtained right now, it's a combination of Simion's initial score in November, Călin Georgescu's score, and also I would say a bonus of protest from the population, because part of the population had the feeling that they were denied their initial, correct, exercise of political will back in November. So it's pragmatic and it's useful for Mr. Simion to keep Mr. Georgescu close, but at the same time in politics, you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. It's less likely that Mr. Georgescu would be an acceptable prime minister even for a minority government.
Yes, and so far, with the campaigning you have observed in the first and second round of elections, has the issue of Russian interference been raised again?
The authorities are much more cautious. And from my perspective, separate from only any kind of, let's say, geopolitical interference or even trolling by some of the Russian ideologues, like Mr. Dugin or authorities from Moscow, I would say that the main issues which happened last time when we were problematic also as regards Mr. Georgescu, namely the issue of financing of particularly of online campaigns, and also the issue of respect of the rules of political transparency are now being carefully scrutinized by authorities. What do I mean by this? All candidates were very careful about the sums that they declared, that they used for their campaigns, offline or online. And now, if you're looking across the Romanian social media, all of the political candidates had to have like a mini banner for each photo or for each message saying that this is a publicity material in the context of presidential elections. So our authorities are careful. Everybody's, is I would say, extra interested to make sure that what happened in November never happens again. We need to restore trust in our democracy.
Yes. And Radu, just finally, we've just had elections here in Australia, and we've also seen in the case of Canada and even Singapore that the Trump factor did weigh quite heavily on the minds of voters. Has this been the case for Romania?
Romanians like Americans, and Mr. Simeone tries quite a lot to become the MAGA guy. In fact, a lot of the titles on Monday was that MAGA won in Romania for the first round. Yes, we like the Americans. I'm not sure how much we like necessarily Mr. Trump. We haven't really polled that. But leaving that aside, I would say that it's a good political instinct for Mr. Simeone to try to get his legitimacy from a conservative network, because this way he also escapes any kind of any other geopolitical accusations such as being close to Russia. So it's much better to be a MAGA friend than to be Russia's friend, right? But it remains to be seen if honestly that will bring him extra political capital. From my perspective, it's more an issue of validation, but not necessarily a huge bonus, and it remains to be seen in 2 weeks' time if indeed it helped him for something, this MAGA association.
Yes, we'll be watching those results very closely. Radu Magdin in Bucharest, thank you so much for your analysis once again.
Thank you so much.